Hi guys, here we are getting ready to kind of get serious with our fraction unit. We've done some preliminary things to kind of get ready for reducing and finding common denominators. We did looking at factors and looking at multiples. We've done greatest common factor and least common multiple, and now we're getting ready to really just think about fractions. So you've got this note paper that you got in class. If you didn't get it in class, of course, you can always download it from the file on Canvas. And what you're going to do with this is you're going to take this bottom corner and just fold it up to the top of your paper so that you have this nice crease here and you see the word fractions along the side. And then you're going to take from this corner here and fold it down so that you've got this nice arrow looking fold, and you've got the words numerator and denominator and total on the outside. So let's start with just the very basics, and I hope you're already comfortable with some of this, but we'll talk it through just so we all have common ground to start with. So we know that a fraction has a numerator and a denominator, and the top part of the fraction tells us the number of equal amounts or equal parts that we have. Number of equal parts out of the whole. So if I had a fraction like 1/2, and half of it was shaded here, this shows 1/2. There are two parts, and one of those parts is what we're thinking about, what's shaded. All right, so numerator. And then the denominator is the number on the bottom of a fraction, and it's the total number of equal parts. So for this fraction we would have a 1 on the top because we're looking at 1 out of a total of 2. So ways I've heard to remember, which the biggest problem here of course is remembering which is the top and which is the bottom. So I've heard people say, oh, they remember Notre Dame, and on the top, D on the bottom. Other people I've heard say, well, they think about the D as being down, so the denominator goes down on the bottom. Whatever works for you is great. So those are just a couple of tips. All right, so we're going to open up and take a few more notes here. So we've got some fill in the blanks here. So a fraction describes one or more parts of a whole. So a fraction, what we're dealing with, what is a fraction? A fraction describes one or more parts of a whole that is divided into equal parts. And that's important. The parts have to be equal. So in our scenario here, the total parts, there are 6 of them. There are 6 triangles in this hexagon. So there are 6 parts. The total that we have shaded are 2. 2 out of the 6 are shaded. So this would be our numerator, and this would be our denominator. So if we want to represent the shaded parts as a fraction, we would say that we're looking at 2 shaded parts out of 6 whole parts. Now, of course, you've learned that this can be reduced, and we can reduce that by dividing both the top and the bottom by the same number. In this case, we divide both of them by 2, and that's where that greatest common factor work comes in. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. And so we would see that 2/6 and 1/3 are the same. And you can see that in the picture here also. This is a third, this is a third, and this is a third. If this were a pizza and I was eating 2 out of the 6, I'd be eating a third of the pizza. And there you hear our school bell, right? All right, we'll just let that go off. Okay. Then we've got, if we open this up, we have some more pictures to just kind of help us see what fractions are and just remember what fractions are. So we've got our line, and we're dividing it into equal parts. You can see that this line's been divided into 4 equal parts. So the total parts are 4. And then what do we have shaded? We have shaded 1 out of 4. And so then the fraction would be 1 part shaded out of 4 total parts. The top number, the numerator, is divided by the denominator. If you recall, that's how we got our percents and decimals when we did that earlier this year, and we'll revisit that again this unit. But fractions are simply division problems where the numerator's in the top, or the number we divide into, and the denominator's on the bottom, the number we divide by. Okay, so divisor, dividend. All right, so write this problem over here, 3 divided by 4, write it as a fraction, would be 3 in the numerator, 4 in the denominator. So numerator, denominator. 2 divided by 5 would be 2 divided by 5. Okay, I'll give you a minute. You do the next one now. Do what 7 divided by 9 would look like as a fraction. Test yourself there. And sure enough, we've got 7 divided by 9. Okay, so when we reduce fractions, we can divide both the numerator and the denominator by the same number. And so here we've got 3/6. We need to think, what is the greatest common factor? What number can divide into both 3 and 6? And I would pick 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. And so what we're saying is that 3/6 is the same as 1/2. They're the same amount. All right. Okay, so go ahead and practice the next two. 2/10, reduce that, and 4/8, reduce that, and then come back and restart the video. So 2, we would divide 2 and 10. The smallest prime, well, the prime number that I can divide into both of those is 2. We actually would like the biggest number we can divide into both of these, but you can start with the smallest. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So that reduces to 1/5. When I look at the numbers 4 and 8, I see that the greatest common factor, the biggest number that divides into both of those, is 4. So I'll divide both sides by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. And so these two are equal. All right, now we've got to think a little bit about mixed numbers and improper fractions. So a mixed number is a whole number and a fraction. This would be like if I had $1.25. That's a mixed number, 1 and 25 hundredths, right? So 2 3/4 is a mixed number. Let's say I needed to cut a piece of ribbon and I wanted it to be 2 feet long and 3/4 of another foot long, 2 3/4. Or 5 7/8. So mixed numbers. They have a whole number and a fraction. Now, improper fractions, then we can take these mixed numbers and we can change them into improper fractions. And I'll show you about that in the next video. But improper fractions are fractions whose numerator is greater than the denominator. So an improper fraction is a fraction where the numerator, the top number, is greater than the denominator. They are fractions that are equal to greater than 1. So they're greater than 1. In other words, we could change them into mixed numbers. So examples of improper fractions would be 9/5. Numerator is bigger than denominator. If we did this division, we'd get a whole number, not a decimal number. 7/3, or 23/5, improper fractions. All right, we're going to stop this video now, and you've got a second notes page. We're going to go ahead and do that second notes page here for the second video.